Tonight on a special edition of All In.
This president believes he is above the law, beyond accountability.
2 weeks into the impeachment inquiry, and the case against Donald J. Trump is strong.
Here's the big truth. The president did it. He did it.
What we know after a dozen officials testified, and our articles of impeachment next.
Frankly, I want a trial.
Plus, all the corruption Trump's not being impeached over.
I do want always corruption.
And I sit down with legendary journalist Bill Moyers on the dangers of so much dishonesty. Live from Studio 6A in Rockefeller Plaza, All In starts right now.
Hello! Hey, everybody. How are you? Good evening. Thank you for being here. Thank you. It's great to have you all here back at our special studio in 30 Rock. It has been another crazy, overwhelming, and ultimately historic week. We're going to get into all the details. We saw 3 marathon days of testimony in the impeachment of Donald J. Trump this week. We've now seen public testimony from 12 different witnesses, including 3 that were requested by the Republicans on the committee, though you'd never notice by the way they treated them. You know, if you were pressed for time this week, and I get it if you were, it was a crazy week, and you want a sort of top-line takeaway from all this testimony and all the hearings this week, it's, he did it. That's basically the top-line takeaway. One thing that we have seen over the last 2 weeks is that there's been a lot of testimony about just how messed up it was for the president to do what he did to Ukraine, right? To withhold assistance and support from this young democracy. I mean, Ukraine continues to this very moment as I'm speaking to you, right? They're literally in a hot shooting war with Russia right now. Thousands and thousands of Ukrainian soldiers have died. Russia's currently occupying huge parts of that country. And we are, the U.S., we are Ukraine's ally. And just to be clear here, because I think this got a little lost this week, we are not Ukraine's ally or assisting them because of some deep state globalist agenda. No, we agreed to give them military aid because of, wait for it, a bipartisan vote in Congress. 351 to 66, which, by the way, many of the Republican congressmen you saw ranting all this week, they all voted for. Jim Jordan, Devin Nunes, among others. They voted for the bill. Oh, and then it was signed into law by President Donald Trump. Okay? This was the policy of both houses of Congress and the president. The president signed it. For President Trump to then throw these roadblocks in front of the new Ukrainian president who's attempting to extricate himself from this horrible war of occupation at a time when they need our support, it's an incredibly screwed up thing to do. And we have a lot of evidence of that. We got a lot of evidence this week. But I want to be clear about something as we think about all the evidence we've seen, which is that as messed up as it is, this is not why President Trump is being impeached. It is not what the president did to Ukraine that is impeachable. It is what he did to all of us as American citizens and American voters. Remember, this is the guy who goes around touting himself as America first. He's looking out for Americans, right? But his conduct here is literally the opposite of that. We've all seen in this testimony that President Trump, what he's consistently doing is throwing Americans under the bus to a foreign interest, selling America out to foreign interests. First, there's the fact the president is trying to, and this is so central to this, he's trying to get an American election determined by forces outside America, by foreigners. It is a grave violation of our sovereignty and democratic determination as a collective people. We determine our elections. We should let other countries determine theirs, right? We should not meddle in other elections, and other people should not meddle in ours. It's a universal principle we should apply. Though, to our great shame as Americans, I feel obliged to say, we have violated that over and over. Let's be clear. But we determine our fate and our future, and we determine our elected representatives. The last time, 2016, Donald Trump solicited foreign assistance very openly. He welcomed it, and he weaponized it, and he used it to win an election. And it fundamentally did something deeply destructive to our sense of democratic legitimacy. And as soon as he thought he got away with it, literally the day after Special Counsel Robert Mueller testified, and a lot of people thought the whole thing was over. Whew. The day after, he gets on the phone with the Ukrainian president, and he tries to extort him into meddling in the upcoming election. So that is the first and the biggest infraction here to us as Americans. The second is that the President of the United States right now is providing active cover for the foreign entity that actually did sabotage our last election. And not only that, he's actually attempting to blame Americans rather than Russians for that sabotage. And that shows up in the part of the Trump's phone call with the Ukrainian president that honestly people talk the least about, because I honestly think it is so cringe-inducingly nuts. And it's the conspiracy theory that made its way into the president's brain and into that phone call with the Ukrainian president. And it's almost too embarrassing to actually get into the details, so Republicans just had this euphemism for it. They say 2016. Have you heard that, right? In the hearings, you wanted to investigate 2016. That's a shorthand. Trump didn't say 2016 on the phone call. Check the transcript. He said CrowdStrike. Look at the call notes. Quote, "I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people, the server. They say Ukraine has it." What is Zelensky thinking at that moment? So 4 months after the call, the president is still parroting that insane conspiracy theory. Literally this morning on Fox and Friends, President Trump repeated the exact same thing, almost verbatim. A conspiracy theory, which I'm going to explain in a moment, is so nuts, it's so out there, that even one Stephen James Ducey, sitting on the curvy couch, staring dead-eyed into the camera as the president ranted, was forced to raise his voice with a gentle reminder that we live on planet Earth.
A lot of it had to do, they say, with Ukraine.
But Mr. President,
it's very interesting. It's very interesting. They have the server, right, from the DNC, Democratic National Committee.
Who has the server?
Now, the FBI went in and they told him, "Get out of here. You're not getting it. We're not giving it to you." They gave the server to CrowdStrike, or whatever it's called, which is a company owned by a very wealthy Ukrainian. And I still want to see that server. You know, the FBI's never gotten that server. That's a big part of this whole thing. Why did they give it to a Ukrainian company?
Are you sure they did that? Are you sure they gave it to Ukraine?
Well, that's what the word is, and that's what I asked actually in my phone call, if you know.
Right.
I mean, I asked it very point blank because we're looking for corruption.
Are you sure they did that, Mr. President? Are you sure about that? Again, just bear with me here while I have to explain what those words mean, because almost no one takes the time to explain it. Do you feel like that? Because it's so wild. Like the CrowdStrike, okay, just to be clear, CrowdStrike is not a Ukrainian company, okay? It's an American one, and it's co-founded by a guy who was born in Russia who is an American citizen. And it is a publicly listed cybersecurity company based in Silicon Valley, in good old Sunnyvale, California. In fact, get this. They have a contract with the Republican Party right now. They do digital security for Fortune 500 companies all over the country, and they happen to have a client back in 2016, the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, who got hacked in 2016. And they hired CrowdStrike to do the analysis. What happened here? And CrowdStrike were the first people to say, we looked at it, we analyzed it, we found the culprit, Russia hacked the DNC. That is why CrowdStrike is the target. Because they were the ones who, to coin a phrase, blew the whistle on Russia. They were the first ones to say, this is Russia. And so they have been a target of Russia and President Donald Trump ever since, right? Fascinating how that works. So the conspiracy theory that has been spun out of it, and it lives in the darkest corners of the internet, and I mean like chans with numbers you've never even encountered. The idea of this conspiracy theory is that, get this, contrary to U.S. intelligence and Special Counsel Mueller, Russia didn't actually hack the DNC. No. Instead, the DNC hacked its own server, then leaked their own emails, which got their own head of the DNC fired, okay? And then in partnership with CrowdStrike, they created a story framing the Russians for the hack they did to themselves. And then they refused to let anyone investigate it, and so they shipped the physical server that had the evidence over to Ukraine. Just to be clear, we have no reason to believe that there's like some server in a vault in Kyiv. that is being locked away from the prying eyes of the FBI. But the whole CrowdStrike conspiracy theory, it is, I want to be real clear about this. It's like 9/11 truther level. Nuts. All right? Because what it says is that the attack that happened on America was actually done internally by Americans to themselves. That's what he's saying when he says that. And that is vile slander against Americans. And it's vile slander all for the purpose of giving cover to the actual foreign intelligence service that committed a grave crime against us, the American electorate. So that's two things. Third thing that is an American betrayal, a betrayal of Americans. And it has to do with President Trump, what he's asking be done to the Bidens. And I don't think this part of it, honestly, has gotten enough attention. Typically, nations are jealous guards of their own sovereignty and of their own legal process, right? I mean, we want to deal with American citizens ideally in American jurisdiction. We tend to be a bit suspicious of other countries' judicial systems. But what's happening here is the opposite. The President of the United States is taking a private American citizen and trying to get a notably corrupt country, Ukraine, to attempt to subject him to their jurisdiction when he is not accused of any crime. If Hunter Biden broke the law, that is the U.S. Justice Department's business. And that's our business. And the American first guy, right? The guy who talks about standing up for Americans, he's pushing a foreign country to pull an American into their system, to sell out an American citizen who is not accused of any crime, and attempt to sacrifice that person at the altar of a foreign judicial process that is notably corrupt and is not our own. And that's not the way it works, or it shouldn't work. You know, we actually have a version right now of the way it should work. And that's with Rudy Giuliani's buddies, Rudy and his buddies Lev and Igor. You know them, you love them. So basically there's an investigation in the Southern District of New York by U.S. authorities, and they have a factual predicate for that investigation, and then they get probable cause to get an indictment, right? They have to go through a U.S. judicial process. And the authorities get an indictment and it looks like, to have secured cooperation from Ukrainian officials without the president making a call to order it. The president doesn't do that. That's for the line prosecutors to do using established international protocols. And Lev and Igor are being prosecuted here in our country under our laws with our constitutional protections because they're Americans. And what the president tried to do in Ukraine is a fundamental betrayal of his duty. Because the president, and I know he doesn't believe this, but it is true, the president is the president of Hunter Biden too. He is. Because Hunter Biden is an American citizen, and it is the president's duty to protect all American citizens from the deprivations of foreign judicial systems. In fact, it is really the president's job to represent all of America's national interests. That's the job. That's the job. He took an oath to take care that the laws are faithfully executed, and he has used the position to benefit himself instead, and not just to benefit himself. He benefits himself at the cost of the American interest, at the cost of American citizens, at the cost of Americans' reputation, at the cost of American sovereignty and self-determination over our own electoral process. And that is the reason that he is being impeached.